Mankind, male and female, were made to be the image of God. What does that mean? I mean, male and female were created for a purpose, created for with a specific identity. Humanity was created to image or represent something. We see in Colossians 1:15 is know that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Jesus represents the Father perfectly, but he was not the first image of God. The first humans were designated as being made to image God in Genesis 1:26-27. Now, as we proceed, rather than taking a naturalistic bend and assuming that mankind may look like God or share some of his characteristics such as creativity, compassion, joy, or relationality, it's perhaps better theologically to see that humanity functioned as the image of God. You see, humans are not like God's image, they are God's image. Humanity, male and female, have no identity outside of Yahweh, who they were created to image, who they were rooted in. As we discussed in the introduction, in the ancient Near East, Selim image was more or less a statue that was a physical expression of the God. They were expressions of, not pictures of. Selim was a statue, an expression of the God, an icon that was actually thought to possess the life, the presence, and the authority of the one being representative. These expressions were a sign of God's dominion, his rule. You see, God was fashioning creation to be ruled. In Genesis chapter 1, the word there are two different words for the idea of ruling and dominion used. One word is used for the governing or the ruling of the sun and the moon over day and night. And the other word for ruling and dominion is used in regard to humanity, male and female, in verse 26 and 28. We see here that man was created in part to rule, to have dominion over this creation. Now, we'll discuss this kingdom language later, but we need to understand this kingdom language is tempered by priestly language as well. The priestly role is unpacked in greater detail in Genesis chapter 2. But for now, I want us to see that in Genesis 1, male and female are created to rule over and have dominion in what theologians tend to see as God's garden temple. Theologian John Walton says that the arrangement of the Genesis 1 narrative should actually remind us of a temple dedication. In a later lesson, we'll examine the idea that the cosmos, earth in particular, was crafted as the temple of Yahweh. Yahweh has created a temple in which he presides and resides. We'll take time investigating this concept later, but for now, we need to understand that if our reality is designed as a cosmic temple, it gives humanity a more defined identity. The idea that is that God set up a Selim for himself in this temple. This idea of God setting up an image of himself in Eden, though may sound weird to us, makes logical sense to the original audience. This idea falls right in line with the other occults of the ancient Near East. You see, all the pagan gods would have their slaves set up Selim images of them in their temples. But the difference here is God sets up the temple himself. He does not need help. He crafts the temple with his word. And we see in this Genesis 2:8, he puts the image he designed and formed in his garden sanctuary. And that Selim was Adam. You see, male and female were created to be his image bearer, his Selim. So what we really have to grasp from this idea in Genesis 1 is that humanity, male and female, function as a sign of Yahweh's rule and dominion to the rest of creation. Once again, knowing our original audience, the children of Israel, this concept of bearing the image of Yahweh will ring significant to them. You see, the children of Israel will see their similarities to Adam, as they themselves are a redeemed people, called to bear the name of Yahweh, designed to and called to mediate the blessings of God to others. It's a very similar commission to the first male and female. They'll see the connection right away. The original audience, the children of Israel, were taught by Moses to see themselves as Yahweh's elect, those who were redeemed and brought into a renewed covenant with God. And by the way, who manage his temple and priestly works. Now, a greater understanding of these ideas are picked up later in Genesis and the Torah, but I want us not to overlook the idea of the original humanity being made as the image of God means they were created with specific identity and purpose. Once again, human identity is rooted in God. Human identity is not rooted in what we do on earth. It's rooted in the God who put us on earth. Person or personhood or what it means to be a person is therefore dependent on God. Being made as God's image establishes our identity as humanity, as male and female. Genesis chapter 1 and 2, among other things, demonstrates how and why the children of Israel were to worship their God. And this is portrayed in stark contrast to the other gods of the ancient Near East. The reasons behind worshiping God is grounded in part by the idea that humanity has been created as the image of God. Humanity was intended to make God visible to this realm of creation. Now, why? I can't answer that. And I won't try to give you a theory now. As Ezekiel, the prophet / priest would say, humbly, only God knows. The thing we need to understand is that humanity was not created to be a free agent who roams around creation and doing as he pleases to survive. That's more like Lamech and Cain, who you see in Genesis 4. Male and female were created with a purpose and an identity. Furthermore, this identity is not something mankind can lose or forfeit or change. It is what mankind is. It's what humanity is. In fact, it is made clear in the first 9 chapters of Genesis that man's identity is not something they can give away, mar, or change. This identity is also referred to as the theological term, the Imago Dei. Theologian Richard Lentz says, the God who creates constitutes his creation in such a fashion that the categories of our understanding of him are hardwired into our being. This idea of God's hardwiring us with who he is referred to as the Imago Dei. In short, the term Imago Dei means humans are created as God's image or images of God. It's because of this we have to see this account, how the original audience would have seen this idea, and not through our more naturalistic lens. Suffice it to say, the context of Genesis 1:9 strongly argues against constructing the Imago Dei as a natural construct. In other words, it's not whether we look or share similarities with God. It's about expressing him, not depicting him. Humanity was made to express, not to depict. When man is following God's original commission and is tov, he's expressing the image of God. When man is fulfilling his purpose, he is imaging God. It's this reason the wisdom literature or the Ketuvim makes comments that even when pagan people, when following true wisdom, can still image God. In short, imaging is not about attributes, appearances. It's about expressing God, being a conduit for God to touch and interact with his creation. Humanity was created to be God's representative and finish God's work. We were created to serve, keep, be fruitful, multiply God throughout creation. Remember, this is a literary work of theology, not a metaphysics, not biology. Furthermore, this passage or section is not a standalone passage. It's part of a much greater work, the Torah. The idea of the Imago Dei is not inserted here to describe human nature and then left behind. No. As noted earlier, it is a term with significant bearing to the children of Israel. So this idea of the Imago Dei is born here and reared through Genesis 9. And then from there, it's teased out through all, well, not only the rest of the Torah, but all of Scripture. In closing, what we need to understand, if we're taking nothing else from my rambling today and the rambling rain, is that mankind, male and female, are contingent on God for their identity. He made them unique from creation and distinct from each other. We'll spend more time unpacking the Imago Dei next time. But for now, when thinking on this idea of identity, instead of thinking what you are, spend time thinking who you are, or more importantly, whose you are.